Hi, I'm Sean Scott here at WBRO, and today I'm visited by Judge Justin Mills from the Crawford County Circuit Court. Circuit, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And welcome today, and I want to thank you for being here. Republican candidate for the judge's office. And so, Justin, why don't you just tell us a little bit about where's Justin come from and some family background?
Okay. Well, I'm married. My wife's name is Lauren. We've been married 6 years and 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I've got 4 kids, two stepsons, Lucas and Deacon, and then I've got Georgia and Duke. From Marengo. Basically, my whole family is from Marengo. Grandparents are Jim and Sue Mills on my dad's side. Mom's side is Revis and Janet Gracilius. Great grandparent Mills Hughes. So basically, from the, I don't want to say the beginning of time, but forever. I'm a Marengo guy. My family's Marengo.
So went to Marengo Elementary.
Yeah, so I went to Marengo Elementary, graduated from Marengo Elementary, graduated from Crawford County High School, and then from there moved on to college. And so, if you like, I can tell you.
Absolutely. So how did Justin leave Crawford County High School?
Okay.
In May of
it had been 2000.
2000, May of 2000. And did you have you're the judge for Crawford County today. So how did you get from across the road at the high school, walking out the door in May, to sitting on the judge's bench Friday?
Okay. Well, so I graduated high school in 2000 from Crawford, and had no intention of being a judge or an attorney. I really didn't know so much what I was going to do, but being an attorney was not on the radar. So I was a mediocre student in high school, made decent grades, but didn't think that being an attorney was realistic. So graduated high school, went to Cincinnati Bible College, my freshman year of college in Cincinnati. Did that. After that, I attended Ivy Tech, got an associate's degree, then went to Indiana State, got a bachelor's degree, and then I got into the insurance field. So I was an insurance agent, and basically just kind of climbed the ranks of the insurance field. I was an agent, and then I went to be an adjuster, and eventually became a litigation adjuster. And so I got involved with attorneys and court stuff and depositions and trials, and got interested, and that's what led me into the legal field. I got to work a lot with specifically some attorneys down in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, and got to be close with a firm down there. They kind of persuaded me, or talked me into taking the LSAT. The LSAT is the exam to get into law school, and so I studied for it really hard for 3 months, and took it a couple of times. I did pretty well. I had pretty good grades in undergrad, and so I applied to get into some law schools, and eventually went to law school in Baton Rouge because I was familiar with Baton Rouge, and I was familiar with the people down there. So I went to law school for 3 years, graduated law school. I had lined up a job for Harold Dillman at Dillman, Chastain and Bird in Corden. And so after I graduated in Louisiana, I came back and went to work in August of 2011 for Harold. I took the bar exam here, passed it. I worked for Harold for 3 years doing general practice. You know, a small town firm has to handle pretty much everything.
Right.
So divorces, criminal stuff, small claims. Did that for 3 years. I opened a practice in Marengo, Mills Law Office. I did that for a couple years. Went to be the chief deputy prosecutor in Crawford County. I did that for a little while. Came back to Mills Law Office, and that's where I was at until the governor appointed me to be judge of Crawford County. So that's a lot.
That's
a lot at you, so.
Yeah, no.
But that's how I went from being at Crawford County High School to being an attorney and now a judge.
Right. With the Justin of left Marengo on Friday night there from the gymnasium, never thought 22 years later he would be judge of the exact same county.
No, I that wasn't on the radar. It wasn't. I never planned to be an attorney. I certainly didn't plan on being a judge, but the older I got and started taking stuff more serious and grades more serious, and
Sure.
and then got introduced to the legal system and how it all worked, it became interesting to me. And I worked really hard to get into law school. I paid for the LSAT, I paid for law school, all those things I paid for myself. And so when you have a vested interest personally,
Sure,
and it's coming,
absolutely.
the money's coming out of your pocket,
Sure.
then you tend
You're
to
gonna
take
put the effort in.
tend to take it more
Yeah.
serious.
So what are some of the assets that you can say you bring to, as the current sitting judge and as a candidate for the next 6 years as Crawford County's judge? What's some of the assets you bring or skill sets?
I think that coming into the office 5 weeks ago, almost going to be 6 weeks now, I think that immediately I was able to jump in and get a handle on some things and move things forward, because I've ran a small business for a decade or over a decade. So I was able to jump into some of the office stuff and the administrative stuff. I met with the council right out of the gate the second week that I was in the office to meet about the budget. And so the budget had already been proposed for 2023 for my office before I got there by the previous judge. So I had about a week to review it. I met with the council, and we agreed to make some cuts of $25,000 the second week I was there for 2023. It came $10,000 from the public defender portion of the budget, and another $15,000 from an old staff position that hadn't been filled for a while. So I felt like if we hadn't filled it in so many years, I feel like I can run my office without it. So let's give the money back to the county and put it in the pot to use elsewhere. So having ran an office for that, previously a decade or so, that helped with the transition to hit the ground running. I bring in a lot of criminal experience and family law experience, because that's primarily what I did at Mills Law Office.
Mm-hmm.
I did a boatload of criminal work and a boatload of family law. And if you look at the Crawford Circuit Court, that's primarily what it is.
Right.
I mean, you have some other stuff, but the majority of the caseload is criminal court and family court. And so I'm really well versed in those areas, and I was able to have court on the first Monday that I was there. I had court, had a full docket, and we've done it every day. So it made it easier that I've ran a small business.
Have that background. Explain the week in the Crawford County Judge's office. What kind of schedule does that entail?
So right now, the way that it's set up is Monday morning, I'll come in and review the docket. I always review the docket the evening before and the morning of to see what we're going to have going on. I go over that with my staff so that we can map out what the day looks like. Mondays right now are basically a civil day, so you'll have family law stuff, some protective orders will be mixed in, but small claims. But then I also look to see if we've had any new arrests over the weekend where those individuals would need to come have their initial hearing before the court. And so I generally do the initial hearings at 1 o'clock on Mondays to give the prosecutor's office the first half of the day to catch up and file their charges and paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Monday looks like. Tuesday, the first half of the day is criminal court. If that bleeds over into the afternoon, then we'll go as long as we need to go to get the job done. And then the rest of the afternoon, we might sprinkle in some civil stuff if we have things that need to be heard. Wednesday, the courthouse is closed. We've been having Chin's Court, which is Department of Child Services, because those were already on the docket. I don't know if that will continue. I'm probably going to move all of those to Thursday afternoons, just because on Wednesdays the courthouse is closed and we don't have security at the front door,
Sure.
which is a safety risk to my staff and everybody else in the courtroom. If you've
Typically, those would be kind of possibly they've been a volatile.
When you get into those type of cases, there's not a lot of happy people in the room. And if that's going to be the scenario, I certainly don't want to put everyone at risk because we don't have someone at the front door checking people like you normally would because the courthouse is closed. Thursday, the first half of the day is criminal court. Second half of the day is going to eventually be your Department of Child Services cases and family law. Friday is small claims, protective orders, family law stuff. And then weekends and everywhere in between is search warrants and any help on cases or things that I might need to do whenever.
Right. So, with your experience that you've had practicing as a defense attorney, and you've been around all these different courts, is there anything that you've seen that maybe you want to try or be a project for the office?
So, the answer is yeah. I mean, on a typical day at Mills Law Office before I was a judge, I would travel around about 200 miles a day. So I would go to 3 or 4 different courts a day. And so I've been doing that for years. I picked up on some things that other courts or other judges do. Specifically, if I spent a lot of time in Orange Circuit Court with Judge Owen. And a couple years back, in the CHINS cases, the Department of Child Services cases, he implemented a process to where when you're just coming in for a review, every so often CHINS cases need to be reviewed to see if everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, to see if the child's doing okay where they are. And so if you're coming to court to have the review just to get to court and everybody get up front and say everybody's doing great and then everybody leaves, well, they might sit there 2, 3, 4 hours before they get up and do that. Well, they've had to take off work. The court is paying a public defender to be there with them. There's a lot of things that come into play. So Judge Owen, on non-contested reviews, or if everyone agrees, you just do those reviews by docket entry or email, and the parties don't come to court. And what that saves is, number one, the parties don't have to take off work.
Right.
So it doesn't take money out of their pocket. The county doesn't have to pay for public defenders to sit there 2, 3, 4 hours or 7 hours just to get up and say everything's great. And so the county saves money from paying public defenders, and it lightens the load on the court docket. So it makes everything go faster and smoother. So I am implementing that. I'm going to steal that from Judge Owen because I've seen how successful that is that he's doing there. And that's one of the things. But there are things I'm kind of cherry picking from different courts that I have witnessed firsthand be successful.
I've seen, and I relate it to like the BMV, to where you take a number and you watch for your thing. And I don't know that Crawford County really has high enough of a court load to be able to do that. But I think it's so confusing for people, especially that it's their first experience in the judicial system, that they see 9 o'clock, or they were told to be there at 9 o'clock. Like a doctor's office visit, they expect to be there and have their hearing at 9 o'clock, only to find out that it could be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Is there any way that you can, I guess you really don't know how that day would go, so can you do a 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, or is that just not something that would be feasible?
Well, it's hard to stagger them. And you see the Crawford Circuit Court right now have criminal court on Tuesdays or Thursdays, and that starts at 9. And on child support cases, they'll set them at 10 to kind of stagger them, but it doesn't work. So I'm going to be messing with that and trying to tweak that to make it work, because you can't predict how long cases are going to go.
Sure.
My goal and what I've been working on is court starts at 9 o'clock. And so it is the judge's job to make sure that everybody's ready to go. And so your prosecutor's office, your defense attorneys, they need to be in a position where they have already talked about cases before the morning of that day. So whether it's the week before or the day before, I want all parties ready to do something at 9 o'clock whenever I call the docket, so that it's a smooth process and that individuals aren't sitting there 3, 4, 5 hours.
Sure.
And again, so that our county is not paying public defenders to sit there 3, 4, 5, 8 hours a day.
Right.
So running I don't want to say strict, but running a tight docket and starting at 9 and starting on time and keeping things going benefits everyone, and it benefits the county.
So we talk about defense, or the public defenders. And so public defenders are assigned to people who are indigent, or who at that time maybe don't have a representation. how is that determined? Who you determine if a person gets a public defender, and then you assign a public defender. How does that work?
That's right. So if in criminal court, when someone comes to their initial hearing, we cover the right to have counsel, and so you have the right to represent yourself. You have the right to go hire a private attorney, or you can ask the court to examine the situation for a public defender. And if that's what they choose to ask for a public defender, there's a list, there's a criteria that they have to meet to qualify for a public defender. So I'll put them under oath, and you ask, where do you live? Who do you live with? Do you pay for it, lease it, own it? Do you have utilities? Well, how much are your utilities a month? Do you own a vehicle? What's your vehicle year? Is it paid for? Do you still own on it? Do you work? Does your spouse work? Do you have any bank accounts? How much is in your bank account? Do you have any assets that are over $500 in value? And so those are the questions that you ask to get a sense or an idea of what that individual's financial status is, to see whether they would qualify for the county to pay for them an attorney.
So if they say no, yeah, I don't have any of that, sir. I'm just I've not worked in 10 years because I'm disabled, and you assign them a public defender, which now it's running on the tax bill for the county at $90 an hour, and then they walk out and get their 2022 Dodge Durango.
That's a problem. So, as I mentioned, they're under oath. So I put them under oath. Anyone who intentionally lies under oath that's perjury.
Mm-hmm. So
that's a whole nother set of issues, a whole nother situation. But to your point, if it comes to my attention that is the case,
sure,
or if it comes to the attention that an individual has assets or is in a financial situation that they construed on the record, then at our next court date,
right,
that will be something that we address.
Come January the 31st, when they get a $8,000 tax check and something like that. We kind of talk about bonds here. Bonds are set by, well, the state has set a bond schedule. But you as a judge, you're able to modify that bond. How does that work?
So I've got a bond schedule that I go by, and so when a probable cause affidavit is sent to me to review and a warrant is sent to me to sign, I review everything, I sign it, and then I will set a bond, or I'll write the bond in pursuant to our bond schedule, and it varies depending on what.
Are there some of those same questions?
It's not some of those same questions, but what I take into account whenever I'm setting a bond, the first thing overall is the public safety, because that's the houses that I've gone to since January. The platform that I've ran on since January is making sure that families are safe, the community's safe, and holding people accountable for what's going on and what their actions are. So when I'm setting a bond, I'm at the bond schedule, but you also look at number one, what level crime it is, what level felony it is.
Sure.
You look at take into account of what other things are pending in this court or other courts for that individual. Mm-hmm. Is this their first case, or do they have 12 cases pending?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a violent crime? Those type of things.
Mm-hmm.
All of that comes into account when you're looking at the bond. And then, the individual always has the right, or their counsel has the right to ask for a bond modification.
Sure.
And those are the same type of questions that you'll see the state and the attorneys ask the individual on a bond modification hearing is, have you ever been arrested before? How many convictions do you have? Those are the types of questions that you'll see.
So if in kind of going back to the assigning somebody a public defender, and then they get a bond set, and let's say it's $5,000, and then 2 weeks later they bond out, can you use that bond to offset the public defender expense that the county has incurred?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. And you see Judge Owen do that in Orange County. It's another thing that I'm going to steal from him. But individuals that post a bond, let's say they post a $5,000 cash bond, and then or they're assigned a public defender, and then they post a $5,000 cash bond. What you see is at the end of the case, the judge will use that bond money to reimburse the county for the legal fees, the attorney fees that have been paid throughout the life of the case. He would have the attorney, the public defender, submit their bill to the court, and then the court would use that bond money to reimburse the county for what's been paid. And so, when you're setting bond, you go by the bond, you go by what our bond schedule is. You take into account whether that individual is a resident or not of our county, or whether they have ever failed to appear before.
Sure.
All of those things come into
Because it is a
consideration.
promise to appear.
That is correct. But if there is a bond sitting there, then yes, you can use those funds to reimburse the county for the public defender. Or you can, and I've done this since I've been there the last 5 weeks, is you can do bond assignments. If an individual has posted bond and they have a bond sitting there, I'm going to instruct them to go call an attorney and try to hire that attorney to do a bond assignment before I'm going to give you a public defender paid for by our county. If you have enough money to post $1,000 or $5,000,
Sure. Yeah. Then
you've got enough money to hire.
Right, and that's kind of where but it seems like sometimes that always happens after the fact, and I just don't know that the court has ever captured that to help offset, because I know reading the paper in the last couple of years that was an increased amount that was incurred that the county really had never seen before, and I think the caseload has pretty well stayed about the same.
The caseload has stayed the same in Crawford County for the last, I don't even know, 10 years or so. 300 and some odd cases is what has criminally been filed. In Crawford County, it's 300 and some odd criminal cases each year, and that has been the case for years and years. But you've seen our public defender expense raise over the last few years, and that goes back to running an efficient court and getting everything done quickly, but also understanding the things of, if there is a bond sitting there, use the bond money to go hire a private attorney.
Right.
Don't appoint everyone a public defender if they don't qualify.
Right.
If someone has the funds to post $1,000 or more, then they can go hire a private attorney.
Right.
And if they get appointed a PD, public defender, and then they go post a $5,000 or $20,000 bond, well, that money is going to be used to pay the county.
Right. So a buzzword over this probably campaign has been revolving door. And so, if we say we've got 300 and some odd typical criminal cases held throughout the year, how can you address this revolving door? That, I'll be honest, as a law enforcement officer, and my father before me, I've heard the same names, and myself. There's sometimes I almost had that person's birthday memorized.
Well, so you're right in the fact that I've been out talking to people and going to houses since January of this year, and the number one thing that you hear, and you're still hearing it, is the revolving door and the drug epidemic and methamphetamine and heroin and fentanyl. It is a problem. It's a gigantic problem in our county, and not just here, but all around us. It's a regional thing, and that's why I got into the mix in the first place, is because there is that problem here, and I looked at the situation and how it was being handled previously. I had ideas that were different, ways of doing things that were different. I felt like I could do, and that's why I put my name in the hat. And so, to me, when you see cases come through the court, and it might be the same people, you've got people that have substance abuse problems, and you have people that are drug dealers, and there's a difference.
Sure. Yeah.
To me, there's a big difference.
Yeah.
And so, I'm all ears about getting individuals help that have substance abuse problems and that have never really sought help or been given that opportunity, and this is maybe the first time that they've been caught up in that. Someone who's had that opportunity, or who has been caught up 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 times, not so much. Your drug dealers who are peddling drugs into our community and peddling drugs to our kids and all around our community and pumping drugs and running them across the county, that's a different scenario to me. And so when you talk about the revolving door and you talk about holding individuals accountable, that's in my opinion, has been the problem with our county, is that you see individuals that are doing those things and there hasn't been a lot of consequences, and they know that, and that's why they're doing business in our county, is because there hasn't been consequences. And so I believe in holding people accountable. I believe that they have to know that there are consequences to stop that revolving door and to stop the drugs pumping into our county, because Crawford County needs to not be known as a place that you can do business for drug dealers. It needs to be known as a place where if you get caught, there's a consequence, and you're going to pay the consequence.
You know, and I can share that I talk to a lot of law enforcement officers who, you know, are getting to a point in their careers maybe where they feel like doing their job is unwarranted, when they're turning around and coming back and arresting that same person, and then they're out the back door before they've even finished their case report out.
Right. It's frustrating to law enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, it's frustrating to work the hours that you work as a law enforcement officer, and you're not making boatloads of money. You're away from your family and your kids working those hours. You're putting your life at risk. You're not always treated great or with respect, and you do all that. And if you talk to the police officers, it's kind of, you know, if you talk to a police officer, you can see it in their eyes. It's something they love to do, despite all of those things I just mentioned. They still love to do it, but it's frustrating for them to make an arrest on an individual and find, you know, all the drugs and everything, just to see them walk out the door or be done before they can even get their report turned in. And so that's something that I'm trying to address, protecting the community and our families, and trying to stop those things that have gone on. That's been number one, what I'm trying to do and what I've ran on the whole time.
Right. So if a defendant makes it through the system and it comes time, now kind of I guess really one of the most important parts of the judge's aspect is the sentencing. How are you on sentencing?
So typically, a lot of the cases that come before the court, a plea deal has been made. So
and I understand too, the state has already set time limits. So
right.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, the state, the prosecutor's office, and the defendant have struck a plea deal, and they'll put the plea deal in front of the court to run through and to accept the plea. The court doesn't have to accept the plea. It's not common for the judge to reject a plea deal, but I've certainly seen it done. And so in those scenarios, it's typically when the judge just feels like the agreement or whatever the consequence is or the plea is not consistent with what's been going on in that court or how he runs his court or she runs her court. When a plea agreement is sent to the court, you can accept it, you can reject it, or you can do a blind plea. And when you do a blind plea, that comes in front of the judge. A judge, I would look at several different things as far as punishment goes. You can have an executed sentence, which means the individual serves that time in jail or prison. You can suspend it to probation. You can do home incarceration, work release, community service, or you can just have a time served deal. So those are the punishments, those are the consequences that you look at in the aspect of sentencing. When you're looking at how to come upon which one of those you're going to choose, it's a number of things that you look at. You've got, I don't want to bore everybody and get too in depth, but you got mitigators,
Sure.
Aggravating circumstances, mitigating circumstances.
And that's something that the probation department does.
Right.
They do a pre-sentence investigation, and they do the kind of legwork for, I guess, the prosecutor to say, here's what we found historically on this person and in other courts, and and then of course, like you said, there are enhancements if there is on that particular case, and but then again, you have that option that if you say, person I know you can't say personally that you feel, but if you feel that, guys, this is not going to work for the victim. Does the victim have what kind of?
Yeah. So whenever you have a case, or when I have a case that comes in front of me, and if there is a victim involved, before I could ever accept a plea agreement or be done with a case, the victim has the right to have input in that case. So, I've had cases in the last 5 weeks where there were victims involved, and that's one of the questions that I asked the prosecutor is, have you notified the victim? Do they know about today's hearing? Do they know about the agreement that you have? Are they okay with it? And the victim has that right to have input and to even come to court and voice their opinion. Mm-hmm. So you got to make sure that rule has been followed.
Right. Is there something you've seen, because again, you've been around the Crawford County Court for a while? Was there something that you've seen that you, I guess you would say, were so enthusiastic when you were appointed by the governor that, man, I'm going to be able to change something real quick? Was there a hot, I don't know, a hot idea or frustration that you wanted to address?
As soon as I got there, I don't know. I mean, as soon as I got there, I think the major things that I did quickly was I say that I opened up the courtroom, and that's a loose term, but I did. I mean, because in my opinion is, for the last several years, you walked by the Crawford County Circuit Court and it was like a vault. You really didn't know what was going on behind those doors. It was like a big secret, and that's not good. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's our community's courtroom. Our taxpayers pay for it, so it should be accessible. People should feel like they know what's going on in our court. So I changed that. I literally, when we're not having court, the doors are open, so that you can see what's going on or what it looks like, and have that accessibility. I did away with Zoom because it's frustrating. I mean, I'll just be honest. Zoom is frustrating for everyone involved, and also it makes it really easy not to come to court.
Sure.
And so you've got people that are sitting on their couch with a hat on. I've seen people in court when I was an attorney on Zoom that were smoking cigarettes, on Zoom, and that's not acceptable. And so I think that specifically in Crawford County, you've got a situation where if you're going to cross-examine a witness, or if you're being sued by someone, you should be able to cross-examine them or ask them questions to their face instead of doing it over a computer screen where they're maybe 200 miles away.
Sure.
And if someone is going to sue somebody or pursue litigation in Crawford County, and they're miles and miles or states away, they need to come to Crawford County to do that. They shouldn't be able to do it a state away or 3 hours away.
That I think a lot of entities, and I'm not saying just courts, but I'm saying entities, corporations, businesses, doctors' offices, whatever. There were so many things, so many people that took advantage of that immediate, okay, we can still do business, we're going to do it through Zoom, but I think we really got lax, and I think our court system fell behind. I think, like you're saying too, people developed less of a respect for the court. And I'm going to say this: how do you feel as judge if somebody does fail to appear? If they get arrested again 2 weeks later, how do you feel about that? I mean, is that an insult to you?
It's so.
I don't mean personally. I mean to the court.
It's an insult to the court if an individual knows, if they've been served notice that they're supposed to be at court, mm-hmm. and you can see that they've been served notice by sheriff or by certified mail, and they just don't appear. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. Or if an individual, if you bond out or get released from jail and you are alleged to have committed a crime 24 hours later, well, that's a problem.
Right.
And I've been there for 5 weeks. If you don't show up for court, you get a failure to appear warrant. Yeah. If I can see that you've been given notice to be there for court and you just choose not to come to court, you're going to get a failure to appear.
Mm-hmm. And just like probation violations. You know, they sign all of these things. It says, I promise I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm not going to, you know, whatever, all the things they go through. And I've actually had certain circumstances where I've actually printed out the court document, highlighted it, and handed it to somebody and say, was there a problem that you had understanding this from the courtroom? I know when you're in court, sometimes it's just a blur, and you know, it's kind of confusing, but in the end, I think to me, it's an insult to the judicial system that you just think you got to get out of jail, you know.
Yeah, I think that goes back to that's the main thing that I've worked on for 5 weeks since I've been there, is setting an expectation level for Crawford County Circuit Court, so that not just people in the courthouse know how I'm going to be running that court. Everybody knows,
Right.
Countywide, the counties next to us, so that everyone knows what to expect from Crawford County. And it goes to that, where the expectation level is that if you don't show up for court right now, maybe it's not a big deal, or maybe it doesn't matter. That's kind of where we were at. That's not where we're at now. It's not where we're going to be at as long as I'm there. I want there to be the expectation level of, if I don't show up for court, if I know I'm supposed to be there and I just don't go, I know what's going to happen. Or, you know, if you are on probation and not doing what's been ordered and not complying and meeting with your probation officer, or still doing drugs or whatever it may be, you know what the consequence is going to be. I think that if there's a consistent set of expectations across the board where everyone knows, that deters people from coming to our county to do illegal business. If they know Crawford, if the expectation level is known outside of our county walls, that Crawford County is not the place that you want to go do that,
Right.
it benefits the whole community.
You know, it's kind of like if you would even use the scenario of you knew what teachers you had to in school, which ones you sit down, you
Right.
couldn't talk in class, or you couldn't ask to go to the bathroom or whatever. And I think, you know, I had discussion before with some other candidates talking about again, wanting the county to be known that you don't want to do drugs here.
Right.
I just did some training in Illinois where they were just outside of Chicago. This county was, and so they were close enough that they got dumped. All the stuff got dumped on them, the stolen cars, and so they put plate readers up on the main roads going into the town, and so it notifies as soon as a stolen car comes into the county there, or the town, and notifies them, and immediately they said immediately, you know, that less cars started
Right.
getting dumped because people knew, hey, don't go to Peru because they got cameras and they'll see.
Right.
And you know, we put the speed limit sign up in Marengo, and it was instant. It was instant that I could read the speeds and see that people knew, just like people used to say, you don't speed through Georgetown,
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And I mean, so hopefully Crawford County will be known in the future for, you don't come do drugs in Crawford County.
Right.
Leave your meth on Bank Street in Louisville.
Exactly.
Don't bring it over here.
That's why I got involved in running for this spot. That's what I've been trying to do since I've been there. That's my overall plan. That's always been my goal, is to change that aspect, because that's why I got involved.
Right. So, final closing there. Where is your platform, or what is your stance on where do you want to tell the people of Crawford County what the judge's office would be like in 6 years?
So I've already started making some changes that I can make right now. You know, I got involved to do things such as help out in the financial aspect, save tax money, and I've already started doing that. We've saved $25,000 off of what would have been the budget for 2023, and put that back into the county to use in other areas that need assistance. And then the other aspect of it is to hold individuals accountable. And you hold individuals accountable, and they know that there's consequences if they don't do what is ordered for them to do, or what they have signed their name on the line to do. And I think that you make the expectation level to where they can know, they can expect that if I don't do what's asked of me, I know what's going to happen, and I know that there's going to be a consequence. Because if that's how our county is structured moving forward, then it's going to deter some of the negative activity and people coming from other states or big cities around us to our small community to make drugs and distribute drugs if they know that's not that there will be consequences here if you get caught doing that. So in 6 years, I want to have the judge's office in a place where financially we've saved tax money and we've trimmed down our budget, trimmed the fat off of it to get it to where it's feasible and it's consistent each year and you don't see big spikes each year. I want to get our public defender program back down to where it used to be. Lynn Lopp had it at like, I want to say right at $100,000 back whenever he left. So my goal is to trim it down to get it as low as I can back to where it used to be. But the main thing is I want Crawford County to be, as long as I'm there, to be known as a place where individuals are held accountable. There's consequences, and it's not the place that you come to peddle your drugs and to get 8, 9, and 10 chances. This is not the place for that.
Great. Thank you, Justin, for
Thank
coming
you.
today.
I appreciate it.
You've had a busy campaign here, and you've got a busy day. If anybody wants to reach out to you here in the last week of the campaign, how do they get a hold of you?
The office number at the judge's office is 812-338-3113. My email address is attorneyjustinmills@gmail.com, and then I have a Facebook page still, Justin Mills for Judge.
So what kind of day you got today?
So we're doing this morning. I'm going to go. I've got to hand out some signs.
We could have been at a deer stand today, and instead we're doing this.
I'd love to be in a deer stand. In 2 weeks, I will be in a deer stand. But I got to go hand out some signs. I have doors to knock on. I got a list of individuals I have to go talk to. I'm going to go to Milltown. They're having an event downtown this afternoon, and then I'll be back here for Sheriff Howell's chili cook-off and trunk or treat later this evening. So we've got about 10 days left, and I'm going to knock on doors and keep doing what I'm doing until it's over.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for making yourself a choice in the candidacy here for judge. Your civic duty, you've went above and beyond what most of the people in the community would ever think to do. One of the things that we want to try to do, and what we're trying to do here with the station, is to educate the public on candidates and who you are, who are your candidates. And I think it's very important that people reach out if they do have that final question that may make a difference. And again, there are some real important. This is not a presidential election, but there are some real important offices that are, some of the ones that make the biggest decisions in this county. You take the judge's office, step down from there, the prosecutor's office, step down from there, the sheriff's office, step down from there, the auditor and clerk's office. The auditor handles all the bills, and the clerk brings through, the assessor with all the assessment values that are going on. The school board this year, the biggest corporation in the county handling our kids. Those are all really important decisions, and so I feel it's very important that people make a honest, educated decision on who should hold that office for the next 4 to 6 years.
I appreciate you having me. I really do. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm pretty accessible, and I make it a point to return phone calls, emails, or to get out to your house and meet with you.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
All right. Take care.
Okay.